All right, Matt, thanks for joining us today, man. Appreciate your time.
Brother, I appreciate it. Small world that we connect to a complete third party that we didn't know either one of us. Um, we didn't know each other, but she works for your company and thought that I'd be a good fit for the show. And who knew that we were both former air marshals? So
Yeah, yeah. What if in the Philadelphia office,
yeah,
nonetheless. Very
yeah.
small world. That's a I don't know if that's called an elite brotherhood or just a it's a
Well,
club.
well, I mean,
It's a club.
there's only so many that are in the office, so it's a it's certainly an eclectic group. That
Eclectic's right. Hey, so you and I mean, I love to start talking. Usually I like to start talking with our guests about their background and just sort of what the unique part of their story is. But you and I were just talking a second ago, and I think I got to start with this. You were Tim Tebow's bodyguard for 5 years.
Yeah, almost. Yeah. So, and to put a little bit more context around it, I
Yeah,
didn't work for him every day. It wasn't like
sure.
so it was situational when he needed stuff. It started when he was in college. And it actually started because I was the head of security for Maxwell Football Club, which is based out of Philadelphia. And the Maxwell Award is internationally recognized, was one of the top awards in the world of football, both high school, college, and pro. So he won as a sophomore after they won the '08 championship, which is one of those jerseys there behind me. Um, and nobody wanted to do security for him, and I was running the detail, so I really didn't do the hands-on stuff. But none of my guys, which were all volunteer cops and former military guys, that for a weekend get to hang out with celebrities and get stuff signed and live life experiences that most people don't have access to. And nobody wanted to do Tim because he was the weird Christian guy that wouldn't be very exciting being around Tim. They thought so. Long story short, I became close with him and his family, and they started bringing me out for things that they needed some reassurance for, and then that just grew from there. And sadly, when Tim became the most polarizing figure in sports with the kneeling
Yeah,
and the tape with the Bible verses and all that stuff, his his polarity grew, but also did his fame. So he got signed by one of the big talent agencies, William Morris, out in
yeah,
LA. And once you do that, then they own all aspects of your personal and professional life. So they have their own security people. So I got phased out. So, which it probably met its natural end, but great family, great human being, and certainly a when you're old sitting around a campfire, great stories.
what do people not know about the executive protection or the bodyguard work that what that they think they know? Like what's the Hollywood myth and what's the truth in what are the top 3 things that people go, "Oh yeah," like you're like, "Hold on, brother, that's not at all what it's like."
Yeah, it's kind of like you know being in the military, an air marshal or cop. It's 95% standing around, 5% fun. No, it's not you're on your feet all the time. You're not sleeping much. It's you're at the whim of someone else. You get the plans for what the trip is or what the event is, or
Yeah.
and you have to come up with some sort of an operational security plan, and then that plan always gets thrown out the window because there's always a change that or on the fly, and then you got to be able to adapt to it. So that's the bodyguarding world is not as glamorous as they make it look, and 9 times out of 10, you're help. You're not part of their crew. You're not in the inner
Yeah.
circle. You're just in a hired piece of a puzzle, and you really don't have any value to them outside of that. And the rare occasion is the Tebow family, which it started off more personal, anyways. So it just sort of stayed in a hybrid professional personal world, and it was one of the rare security opportunities I had where I actually got to be. I don't want to say in the inner circle, but for a while I had access to a lot of things that no one else did, and outside of working. So it was a rare but special time.
Tell us a little about your story. I mean, you've got a fascinating story. You've kind of had a like an octopus. You've had tentacles and so many varieties of or such a variety of endeavors. You went in the army back in the 90s, is that right?
'89. Yep.
89, 4 years in, got out, became a cop, right? and
So
kind of give us like the 2 minute rundown of your story.
yeah, well, I don't know. I can do 2 minutes, but we'll give it our best shot.
Yeah, and then we'll
Um,
we'll pluck into some of those.
I am a servant. That's what I've always been my entire life. And but a servant who has to have his own identity and his own way of handling things and his own. I don't like being told what to do. I'm not a rule follower. I'm certainly not the greatest teammate. I kind of am headstrong, and I'm always trying to find new ways to do something someone else has already done 100 different ways. So I had a Coast Guard appointment coming out of high school. Decided to enlist in the Army, not go to the Coast Guard because I didn't see myself doing well there because I was a smoke and mirrors kid. I was super smart, but I was always trying to find the loopholes. I didn't really care about the the art of learning. I just cared about the art of winning. So getting A's. How do I get an A and move on to the next day? And that's kind of how I was. I grew up as a poor kid in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, with a single mom. I was always trying to find. I was a hustler. I was. We grew up
Hmm.
in projects and just trying to. I was always shucking and jiving. I was a smoke and mirrors kid. And so I knew I'd be exposed at the Coast Guard Academy as a smoke and mirrors kid. So I went in the Army and found that I got exposed there. So I didn't avoid getting exposed. I found out a different way. I went to Intel school and I found out that I needed to use my brain to become a cryptanalyst. I really needed to learn it. And I couldn't just find the loophole in the system and exploit it. And I almost failed out. And luckily I didn't. And I became very good at my job as a Intel analyst and served in the Gulf War, got out. Always wanted to be a cop since I was 6. My mom dated a cop when I was little. And first thing I sat in his car and put his hat on, I was like, that's it. I'm going to be a cop. And so I got hired a few months after I got out in '93, and 28 years later, almost 29, still here. And it's been a
I
crazy world of
I got to ask you. I want to dig into a couple of those things, but I got to ask you, as a kid who you said by through your own words, not a rule follower, always looking for ways to bypass the system or to beat the system. And I don't want to paraphrase or put words in your mouth. How does somebody like that end up in very rigid structures like the military and like police work when that's and how have you reconciled those the sort of the polar opposite mentalities?
oh, it's totally a great question, and I've asked myself the same one because I always go back to while I am a, a servant by nature, like I've always helped
Yeah.
people, so that was where I was drawn. Like, how can I help people and do it, cool? Like, carry a gun, like, really save that. I always had a hero complex. I've always had this desire to um, save the day. And so that's growing up, that was kind of my helping everybody. Like, I did a lot of weird, crazy shit when I was younger to help people that you'd be like, you did that when you were 11, like that kind of stuff. And I so it was a natural career choice, but an unnatural personality choice. Like, I made the Army fit me. Now, I made it. I got myself in a lot of trouble throughout my 4 years in the Army, but I always recovered with a gigantic win. And then I have a setback, getting in trouble, and I recover with a gigantic win. And typically, I would use my strengths to come up with those big wins, and then that would overshadow the fact that I couldn't show up for formations on time, and my uniform wasn't necessarily the best, and my boots certainly weren't polished, and I didn't necessarily follow all of the rules. Um, and when I would get caught, I'd usually get jammed up pretty good. But then I come back and I do something, they go, "Holy shit, capable of that!" And then that would be kind of my yin and yang. And then sort of the same in law enforcement. I'm I've figured out how to be really, really good at certain parts of the job that naturally felt good to me, while sort of almost, have you ever seen like in a commercial? There's actually a commercial where they talk about this, where they focus on the main character and then everybody else blurs behind them.
Yeah.
It was like I don't know, an Allstate commercial, whatever it was, Geico. But I was able to blur the stuff that I wasn't interested in, because if I'm not interested, I'm not going to put any effort into it. That's just the way I've always been wired. I've been able to blur those to the person looking at me, almost like they accept those things to get this thing. And that's how I spent my career. But Air Marshals was a perfect example. I couldn't follow certain rules. I couldn't reconcile how stupid they were to justify my job. Like I would be like, fire me. Like I'm okay, fire me. Like I'm not doing that. That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Just fucking fire me. And that's what I would say. And they wouldn't fire me because they knew it was fucking stupid too. So like
Yeah.
the person telling me it was to do it knew it was stupid. And I would call, I don't know, ballsy enough, whatever the term is, to call out that stuff, knowing that I could play my cards and be screwed. So back in the day, we started off in the beginning of the air marshal program. It was kind of like the wild wild west. Grow your hair long, do whatever you want. Anybody
Yeah.
touches the cockpit door, 6 round rhythm drill at the back, you're the hero. And then it went to TSA, and then within a year of that, we became the Secret Service of the airline industry, where we were very publicly known who we were by the way we were dressed. And if you're flying an overnight trip to San Juan, Puerto Rico, they wanted you to wear a sport coat
Yeah.
when everyone on the flight is wearing Tommy Bahama shirts and shorts and flip flops. And
Yeah.
you walk on with your sport coat and you're like, listen, that just doesn't make any sense to me. If I'm supposed to help keep a plane from flying into a building or crashing into a field or having everybody on board get shot by a terrorist, that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
If my job is to blend in and you're making me stand out right from the beginning, you're already putting me at a disadvantage.
We became storefront mannequins.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were the warm fuzzy, and quite frankly, we were the punt team. So if if you're a bad guy and you're casing out flights and they're not paying with credit card to get their flights, they're buying cash. Flights one ways typically if they're going to do it. They're going to look and see where is the air marshal going because we've seen them walking around literally. And I don't know how it was when you got in, but it was literally you would walk through any airport in the country and like nod at each other because you
Yeah.
knew who the other air marshals were. So if we could figure that out, and he's looking to see where is an air marshal possibly going, I'm not going on that flight. And so
Yeah.
we're just punting them to the 98% of the other flights that don't have an air marshal on them. So to me, there's a lot of tactical and strategic problems with that agency that I just couldn't reconcile. So I wrote a book about, and it wasn't even about the air marshals, but I wrote a book about my brother who was autistic and stuttered, passed away in '89 right before I went in the army. And I wrote it while I was an air marshal because I had a lot of free time to do
Yeah.
that. So they tried to block me from publishing the book because I did talk about 9/11 and I did talk about joining an agency, but I didn't name the agency. I didn't give out any
Yeah.
details of what I did or anything like that. They tried to block me because I didn't get permission. And that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back for me is, I wanted to share my brother's story and they wouldn't let me. So I left. Um, and then it became a cop again, which I didn't really want to do. That had run its course, but I needed to get out of the air marshals and there was an opportunity. So I took it. And 17 years later, still there. So yeah, that's pretty much my nutshell.
Let I want to there's a leadership lesson in there, and I'm asking you not from somebody who's leading people like that, but from somebody who is like that, somebody who has and I think we all know those people. We've either managed them or we've been that person that um if you're not that they're not cut out for just the routine. They need to be challenged, and
Mhm.
they're also the person who questions the status quo. And if you read a lot of leadership books, that's Steve Jobs, that's right, that's Elon. Everybody who questions the status quo until they get to that point is considered a little bit of a pariah. They're a
Yeah.
pain in the ass because they don't just ever accept things as they are. They're always asking, well, why or why not? So if you're a leader and you have that person, a lot of times or leaders have a tendency to just to push them off as they're just a pain in my ass that way. But that's mischaracterizing, or that's missing an opportunity to do something with a guy like yourself who goes, hey, you have so much potential. The army, right? Uh, the army, had they been more fluid, probably could have said, Matt, I know how to keep you out of trouble, and it's by putting you on this. And today the army has like the innovation lab and things like that that might be a better fit for a guy like yourself. So my question is, you are one of those guys, and I think there's a lot of us that find ourselves that we're constantly questioning the status quo. When we find a leader who embraces that, man, we succeed. But when we find a manager who doesn't know how to manage that, we're a thorn in their side. You're like, listen, I got something to contribute to this organization. You are not just putting me in that position. How does a leader maximize that, or what can they do to take somebody like you who has such great potential, whose questioning of the status quo isn't intended to be a pain in the ass. It's because I'm trying to make us better. How does a leader how does a leader get the best out of somebody like that?
Well, I think it depends on the type of structure of the organization. So if you look at the federal government in and of itself, it's a
Sure.
bureaucracy.
Yeah.
So the cogs in the leadership chain are just layers of the bureaucracy. So you're not going to get a Matt Kubler to adjust to the overall mission of the bureaucracy, because the bureaucracy is the thing that I'm fighting against.
Yeah.
So where I didn't fit in the Federal Air
Mm.
Marshals, while I joined because I was pissed off about 9/11 and applied on 9/12 and was hired shortly thereafter,
Wow.
that that my desire to help and serve was authentic. And then when I got there, and after a year, it was no longer the thing that I was sold on. They did the bait and switch, and now I'm working for this machine that I'm not really participating in the thing that I signed up for. I'm not really protecting or serving or doing anything. I'm just making people feel warm and fuzzy, like a cruise line carnival cruise line conductor. Like that's what I felt like. I didn't feel like I was really doing anything of merit. And when I have that feeling of no purpose, then I my idle hands go crazy and my brain drifts and my attitude changes and things like that. So I don't think there was anything the air marshals could have done with me that would have changed what happened during my 4 years and 3 months. Um, but with law enforcement, I'll give you in Pennsylvania, we're not like most states. We have more police departments in Pennsylvania than just about any other state in the country.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of small municipalities that have 8-man, 6-man, 10-man, 15-man departments. And I've worked in strictly small departments, small municipalities. The one I worked in two before I went to the Air Marshals for a total of 10 years before that. I'm now in the same one for 16 plus years. It's the longest I've done anything in my entire life. And it's because I have a leader who understood what he was asking to bring on. Like there's never really any blurred lines with me. There's not a lot of confusion. I'm very clear, and I identify who I am, and I say this is what I am, this is what I am capable of. These are my downsides, these are my positivities. These are the things that I can really do well. Do you want that? Because I don't need to hide me. That's I'm very self-aware, and that's something that growing up with uh, an autistic brother who stuttered and didn't communicate, I was able to speak for him. So understanding body language and human behavior and all that stuff, I learned that as a small child and have developed it for 50 years. So when I went to my boss and I said, "Listen," when we were friends beforehand, I'm like, "Listen, dude, I'm not the easiest guy to manage."
Did you go back to one of the departments that you left
No,
on?
it's a different
Totally different.
department.
Okay.
Yeah, but just all within the same county. So I knew
Sure.
all the guys. So, and we had all started around the same time, and he became chief. And I said, "This is who I am. This is really what you want." He goes, "Dude, you're overqualified for the job. I need you to be someone that solves problems, and I'll let you do that however you see fit." I said, "Dude, bet I'm in." That's my wheelhouse. Is if you're gonna, and then I made him prove that he was gonna let me be that person.
Yeah.
That I am not. I haven't written a ticket in 17 years. Like, I'm not writing tickets. I told him from the start. I said, I think it's actually wrong. Like I think what the government does to fine somebody that much money for making a mistake is wrong, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. I'd rather just pull them over, discuss the problem, say, hey, please don't do that again. It's in the system now. Some other officer pulls you over and see you got a warning, you're probably going to get a ticket. And for me, that makes more sense.
Why is that unique?
So that most people think there's a quota and that cops are
Sure.
out writing tickets because they're trying to make money for their jurisdiction or whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
The reality is, no matter the amount of money that we could possibly generate in an 8-man police department is nominal.
Yeah.
If we went out and rode 10 tickets a day each, it would be just not what people think.
Yeah.
So
You're not
it's
covering
not.
your salaries.
Yeah, no, it's not a money generating operation. It maybe for the government, but not certainly not for the police department.
It's a
Um,
punitive thing to try
yeah,
and
punitive,
reinforce
and
don't do this again.
it's a trackable. right?
Sure.
It's something that it's a metrics that they can justify your time. Um,
Yeah.
and I don't believe that I am there. There's officer discretion exists for a reason. There's gray in the job. I live in the gray. I refuse to operate in the black and the white because I think that's boring, and I think it limits my ability to do the job and be flexible and adaptable to different situations. Even though they
Sure.
may be the same environment, like a domestic, each domestic is different, and how I handle that call should be up to me because I'm the one that they're calling for help.
Makes you less of a
So
robot and more of a human and allows you to bring your human thinking, problem solving elements to
yeah,
the
and I'm
every
not
scenario.
saying there should be all Matt Cooper's all over the place. I'm just saying for me and my boss, who said that you can work in that way here,
Yeah.
and I'm going to give you the latitude to do that, and he did, and I've been very very good at my job and solving problems and not creating um, more drama within the department and the community because the community thinks Collegeville, where I work, has been rated in top 50 in the state of Pennsylvania as safest places to live. Um, Not because we don't have crimes, it's because we solve problems.
Yeah.
And just because I arrest somebody doesn't mean the problem goes away. How you solve that problem could be educating someone on home security systems, right? On locking your car door, on being proactive in a community and then seeing the cars driving by. Bad guys may not come. Like there's all kinds of ways to lower crime that doesn't necessarily get tied directly to a traffic ticket or an arrest.
So tie that back, if I can ask, tie that back to so that's helping people who are on the victims, the perpetrators of, and I'm not going to say crimes because I like the word use it for mistakes, speeding. I was rushing. I had to get to the daycare before it closed. It wasn't a mistake. It was a conscious choice I made, but
Mhm.
but I'm not gonna fine you $1,500 because you were trying to get there to before the daycare closed and you were gonna have to pay an extra. I mean, we know what daycares charge
Yeah.
or something like that. So you talked about how to educate the victims. How do you handle those situations with the perpetrators of the issue, whether it's deliberate, willful misconduct or something, or juveniles being out after curfew and catching somebody underage drinking, all the kind of the silly nonsense that people do. How do you deal with that as a cop where you go, I'm not going to give you a punitive, I'm not going to arrest you, or I'm not going to give you a ticket or whatever it is when even though I can because I have that officer discretion. How do you make decisions in that? What's your
Well,
decision making process like?
I go back to the fact I can read body language and human behavior in
Yeah,
instantaneously almost. So I have an increased advantage over maybe somebody else who didn't grow up the way I did.
sure.
So I'm able to read situations pretty quickly and determine whether or not I'm dealing with somebody who is a poor driver who intentionally just has no care for other people on the roadway and is reckless versus someone who made a mistake and is truly sorry for violating the law on some level. So
Sure.
that, and then also, if somebody's a repeat offender, you call in a car stop, the computer pops up with the 15,000 times they've been pulled over. You
Yeah.
kind of know what you're dealing with. So
They're not
there
that
are
sorry for
ways,
speeding. Yeah.
right? And then you handle it differently. But for me, I've always, I like to keep it real, and I'm not necessarily um, the most politically correct. I have cursed on calls. I've cursed on car stops, and I'll drop an f-bomb, and I'm like, listen, you drive like a fucking dick. Stop driving like a fucking dick. Like that's kind of something. And they're gonna be like, oh, okay. And I'm like, listen, it's pretty simple. We're not asking you to solve a geometric equation. Just don't be an ass when you drive. Like there's got to be a way that you can tell somebody not to be an ass. So, and I try to keep myself as authentic as possible so that they understand who they just dealt with, and maybe their next interaction may not be the same way as it was with me, but I'm hoping that my interaction with them keeps them from having that next one. So they
Hmm.
remember that this cop who kept it real and didn't stick it to them when they easily could have, that as they're driving and they notice, look down, they see the 15 miles an hour over the speed, and they're like, oh shit, I don't want to get pulled over because I'm probably not going to get this guy that I just had.
Yeah.
And so
Huh.
I try to use as much psychology as I possibly can to get somebody to have some level of meter in their brain to go, it's no different than PTSD. PTSD is caused by the brain's inability to handle a trauma it wasn't prepared for. So if I can program people through interactions, real interaction, authentic interactions, those memories become ingrained in their brain, so that when they're doing the same action again, maybe it's that little man on the shoulder that says, "Yo, you may not be so lucky this time. Back it up, slow down." Like that kind of thing. That's kind of when I approach law enforcement. I'm always trying to solve a problem so that the problem doesn't happen to me again, for two reasons. One, I'm a loophole guy, right? I don't want to be doing all that paperwork every single time.
Fair enough.
So I'm
Little
trying to figure out,
self-preservation's an honest
yeah, I mean,
answer.
the job is the worst part of police work is paperwork.
Yeah.
And it's meticulous, it's mundane, it's repetitive, it's sometimes duplicated, and
It's
you're
not
trying to
why
avoid.
anybody became a cop.
No. And that's why you look at city, and I'll give you a real quick example. City cops never come to the suburbs and do well, because in the city you have volume, right? So you have the guys that are on patrol, whether on a foot beat or a car or whatever. They're cuffing stuff, right? They're not writing reports. They're not filling out affidavits. They're not prosecuting cases in court. They're
Yeah.
just robots cuffing stuff, cuffing stuff. And when you got to come out to the suburbs and do all that other stuff that comes with law enforcement, they're like, whoa, that ain't worth the money. And they go back to the city. It's
You
just a different world.
it, you mentioned several times in there, and I think it's poignant here. Like you have an empathy for not just a sympathy, but maybe an empathy because you're a guy who's always looking to bend the rules, not necessarily break them, but bend the rules. And I think there's a subtle but important difference in
Mhm.
bending the rules and outright breaking them. But you referred to many times about your brother being special needs. Do you think growing up with a special needs brother did you get some of that even though you're a rule bender? Did you get a lot of that empathy? Like, hey man, everybody's dealt a different hand, and sometimes we just need to try and walk a mile in somebody's shoes. Did you get that from growing up with your brother that way?
Yeah, and then growing up my dad left when I was 9 months old, so it was me, my mom, and my brother. And my mom worked three jobs, so I know what hard work looks like. I understand
Yeah.
what struggle looks like. I understand what poverty looks like. I understand what hunger looks like. I understand what getting picked on for not having new clothes looks like. I know all of those different vantage points and that's the way it should be in life. Life is a connective train of events that you hopefully are building off of and becoming a more evolved human being, and taking all those experiences and those traumas and managing them and dealing with them and then using them as some sort of positive fuel, or at least a teaching moment, is kind of really what life is all about. So for me, I'm a very intentional person. I don't really react. I'm very strategic. I know my instincts. I not trusted my gut once, and I lost when I didn't. um, I rely on that as a way of how I live life. I think everything in life has to be intentional. If you go on cruise control, that's when life passes you by and you miss opportunities, or things happen that you aren't necessarily aware of or prepared for. Um, so for me, all of those experiences helps me in each one of the instances I have as a law enforcement officer. I can quickly recall those things, which help me make decisions in a much more expedient manner. And how I handle people oftentimes comes from one of those or multiple of those prior situations in my life that I can draw from. And whether it's, you know, domestic, whether it's child abuse, whether it's, talking somebody else trying to commit suicide, or actually having to take somebody's life, like those things are all you draw on. People don't understand. And I did a TEDx audition where I thought I was top 20, top 30, and they took top 25 for a TEDx, and I didn't get it because I'm a cop. And it was a very intellectual group of people, and they felt that my topic was too intense and too controversial. And the topic of the TEDx talk was chaos. That was the theme. And I talked about the chaos that goes in a police officer's head when they have to take someone's life, all of the
Yeah.
moments leading up to pulling the trigger and how quickly that happens, and then how a police officer becomes a police officer. And the understanding that, as a cop, you can graduate high school at 18 and become a cop in Pennsylvania. What the fuck do you know about life at 18? But you could.
Yeah.
You can go to college and get a degree in economics and become a cop. What the fuck do you know about being a cop at 22 with an economics degree? Being a cop is about experiences. And if you didn't have those experiences growing up, that would make that you could easily see where law enforcement would have been present on some level.
Yeah.
You can't draw on anything in that moment when chaos hits. So you have to have one of two things: life experiences before you become a cop. Because if you call 911, you don't know if you're getting a guy that just got off field training and he was an economics degree and he doesn't know jack shit about anything, or you can get the guy with 30 years who's seen it all, but you don't know and you don't get to pick. But you, as the citizen, you still have a high expectation of success rate for the person you call to deal with whatever the problem is
And
and deal with it.
when you say a high expectation of success rate, that's an interesting word choice for it because what you're saying, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but what you're saying is you're going to come and to your point, you mentioned problem solve. You're going to come help me solve my problem. You're going to use the least amount of force, and this isn't a conversation about excessive force and where the world is today and how the world sees cops and excessive force. We can have an offline conversation about that. I come from a family of cops. Both my brothers are cops today,
But
but it's a conversation about the expectation that when you come, you're going to help me solve my problem. If I'm being abused by my husband, you're going to make that problem stop. If that means arresting him or if it means helping us mitigate it, and that's why cops are part therapist, part just listener,
yeah,
part problem solver, part law enforcement officer, right? But you said you're going to show up and you're going to help me succeed, and I think it's interesting because that definition of success, I guess, is just make the problem stop, but uh, in a way that me as the citizen
meets your
caught,
standard. The,
yeah, meets
the
my
standard
standard,
is different.
right?
Each person's standard is different.
And to your
When a
point,
woman
that
calls
that
me,
that life
yeah,
experiences is where that life experience is where you need to come and realize what their expectation of not only what success means, but how you're going to solve that problem for them.
and absent those things, you show up as the cop, say the rookie cop who's got no life experience, wet behind the ears, never been punched in the nose, never smoked a joint, nothing,
Yeah,
and you go into a situation that you've never dealt with before. But the person who called needs you to solve it to their level of satisfaction.
mm,
And you don't even know what that is. You don't know
yeah,
what their expectation is, but you will either meet or fall short. And it doesn't that's how the opinion of police changes constantly, is because we have these young guys that don't know jack shit that are showing up and trying to solve problems that are complex that they've never ever dealt with
yeah,
before, to the level of expectation the citizen wants. And when you get into a situation where um, lethal force is required, you have to think about the fact that what if it's that kid that's got no nothing, like he's got zero ability to make that decision and do it right every single time, because you don't get a chance to mess up when it comes to taking somebody's life without your entire life being destroyed.
yeah,
Whether it was justified or not, you will have some part of your life destroyed.
yeah,
And every kid that has to make that decision, or every veteran that has to make that decision, the process by which they make that decision and the speed in which that decision has to be made is so intense that it's not there is very little time for hatred or animosity or racism or anger. It's usually, oh shit, assess in like nanoseconds. Everything's replaying through your brain what you just think you saw. Assess whether or not that's worthy of you pulling your gun out and pulling a trigger. That's real. And then factor in the whatever the call was. If you're a young kid and you're going to a break in and you walk in the house and you're searching the house, all of a sudden some dude pops out of a closet, you know, you're already at like
yeah,
threat level alpha, right? So all of a sudden, now this pops in, and you have to make a split second decision based on your fear, which is real, but it's based on your lack of knowledge and understanding of what you've done. You've never done this before. but it's you're given a gun, you have to make these choices. What if this guy did have a gun and you didn't react and he killed you, and then your wife and children are left without a father and a husband? Like all these things that come into play is what causes that chaos in the brain of a police officer. And it's not until you have enough experiences in life can you actually have some level of confidence that you can do it well.
What and the name of the book is? I'm sorry, I don't know that.
It's a brother's love, a memoir I wrote in 2006. So, you know, so people for that are. This is a copy of it right here. Me and my brother when I was like 3 and he was 5 or 6. Um,
Why write the book?
I went through 13 years of depression after my brother died, where I had PTSD for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Everybody understands what that is now. I wasn't expecting. I wasn't prepared. I never could have imagined a day where I didn't have him in my life, and I certainly didn't expect to wake up one day and he'd be dead. Um, so I went through, and I didn't really have a lot of grieving time. 6 weeks later, I was in basic training. Um, I never grieved, and I
Yeah.
became angry, and I became disinterested in feeling anything, and I was in a dark place for a long time. And it wasn't until there was a moment that happened after my son was born, my second child, that something was given to me that was made out of my brother's quilt that was made out of my brother's clothes that my grandmother had kept for all these years for whatever reason, and it sort of triggered this emotional, um, uncontrollable emotional reaction. And I went down to my office at like 8 o'clock at night, and I came back up 7:30 in the morning, and I'd written 26,000 words of memories. And they were
Wow.
it was literally just like this, like a movie's scenes of just memories flashing into my brain. And I'm just writing and writing because I had to get them out, and I'm just sobbing and writing and sobbing and writing. And when anybody that reads the book, what I always get from them are they are so vivid. The memories are so like the things I write about it was as if they could see them, and it's because I wrote them in the moment when they were literally I was reliving them,
Wow.
and it was the most
There's a
powerful.
catharsis to there, huh?
Oh my god! And I came up, and the way that our basement door to our house opened up to the kitchen window, and light was coming in from the east. In the morning, the sun was rising, and I saw color for the first time. Like I noticed the vibrancy of the color in the light coming through
Wow.
the window, and it was just something that was very poignant to me. And I would have never. I'm not a guy that would give a shit about color, like, but that's just something that really stopped me, and I just felt this weight start to just release. And from that moment on, I didn't know I was writing a book. I was just getting shit out. And my mom's a retired English teacher, and I said, "Mom, I wrote 26,000 words last night about Andy. What do I do?" She goes, "You write a book." So I hadn't read a book since Animal Farm in ninth grade. Great book, very poignant for today. And I'm like, "Well, Mom, I haven't read a book." She goes, "Well, maybe you
Yeah,
should."
I can't write one if I haven't read one. Yeah.
Right. I started reading, and I was reading Michael Connolly books, and I read some memoirs, and I was an air marshal again. We're on planes a lot, so I realized that I could probably write a book about my life. It's not like I needed to research anything, so I just started doing it in 2006, right before February 2006. I left in June of 2006 from the air marshals. I published it against the air marshals' wishes, and it's the single greatest thing I've ever done in my life.
Awesome, man. That's probably a good stopping point. I think there's probably a lot more we could
Oh
talk
yeah,
about just in terms of the catharsis and the emotional release and how the body and the brain need that. And well, that just gives us reason to bring you back on again and have that conversation another time. Hey, I know you have your own podcast. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you where folks can find you and the name of the podcast.
it's everywhere. Two dates and a dash. So the number two dates and a dash. The name comes from actually Tebow. He, in a lot of his speeches, would recite a poem called "The Dash," where your life is made up of two dates: the date you're born, the date you die, and the dash is the life that you live. Or how are you living your dash? And it always just stuck with me. And I knew that if I was going to do a podcast, it had to be based on no rules,
Yeah.
no structure, because that's who I am. And so it's a very fluid conversational show. I've had everyone from famous athletes and actors and stuff like that to moms who lost their kid from an opioid overdose. So I just want to feature people who have epic stories, have lived the shit out of their dash, and have the ability to engage in a deep conversation. So, and I think out of the 139 or 40 whatever episodes I have, I probably got 95% success rate in that. I got a couple coal bundles in there, but I
Yeah.
think that's just what every show is. But I'm proud of it, and it's anywhere on any platform. They can go to mattcubbler.com. They can see it there. Um, they can see the videos also. If they don't want to go to my website, go to YouTube for Matt Kubler. And I'm not on any social media because I've been banned. So I'm on Instagram, but I don't let anybody follow me because correct.
MattCubbler.com or on YouTube at Matt Kubler. And it's two dates and a dash is the name of the podcast, and it's all your podcast distro channels. Is that right?
That's correct.
Awesome. Hey, Matt, thanks so much for joining us.
Appreciate you, brother. Appreciate the opportunity.
Likewise. Thanks very much, man.